Today I wanted to talk about how being yourself is both the easiest and hardest thing to do at the same time. And I guess this kind of came about because of I've been applying for jobs, and going for interviews is always a thing, right? Where I struggle to figure out how much of myself to really talk about and how much to kind of say what people want to hear. And the last interview that I went to, which if you're wondering why I sound like this, is kind of because on the way here I found out that I'm not getting that job, but so I'm still processing on that. But back to what I wanted to talk about in terms of how being yourself is the easiest and hardest thing to do, is during that interview and also subsequently after the interview, being like, so for the interview I made a commitment to myself to show up as much as possible as I am, and I think I did that for the most part, and that's something that I know logically I should be proud of, but I can't quite feel that yet. But in terms of now I know how it went, which is I didn't get a job, which doesn't really speak to how the interview itself went. But when the last 2 or 3 days where I was waiting, I was basically thinking about how that sense of feeling during the interview where, because I've decided to commit to myself how I really am, it was kind of the easiest thing to be myself, to show up as myself, to talk about things that I genuinely do care about, and also not to be too focused on needing to craft my words perfectly. As you've seen on this channel, when I talk, sometimes it flows out easily and sometimes there's a lot of pauses and some filler words as I try to find the right words. So in a way, that is the easiest thing to do, to be myself, because it comes naturally in a way once I let the mask fall off, once I let the pretense fall off of who I think I need to be. So it's kind of like coming home to yourself, right? It's the easiest thing to be home, but at the same time it's the hardest thing to be, because the reason we have all this mask and pretense that we put forth in front of other people is really because we develop those as coping mechanisms, and they're there because they want to help us survive, right? They want to help us survive this war, and coping mechanisms is how we end up doing that. So they're not really something to be blamed, they're just kind of maybe not the best way for me to be in order to really truly be myself, but they were how I got to survive in this war, so it's kind of hard to blame that. And so it's the hardest thing to be myself, because as much as once I let the masks fall off, it's very easy to kind of be who I actually am. But it's hard because those coping mechanisms came up for a reason, to help me survive, to help me, and in the context of human society generally, it's to help me fit in, to not be so strange, to kind of figure out what other people need, how I can be there, and how I can sort of be helpful, or at the very least not be harmful to the people around. And it's hard because being who I really am, at a lot of times I know from conditioning and from the coping mechanisms that I've adopted that being who I really am will create friction. Part of coping mechanisms is really to kind of grease things over, ease social interactions, make things move the way that people kind of, have a script as to how they are meant to go. So in the context of let's say an interview, you go in, you're kind of trying to sell yourself to why you're a good fit for the job, like generally speaking. And me being myself, I am not really one to try to sell what I'm good at, which could be me being stubborn, or could could be me being stubborn, meaning it's a skill that I do have to get better at, or it could also just be a genuine reflection of maybe how I will eventually come to view the world. And I don't know which way it is yet at this moment, but I would say authentically as I am now, I am not a fan of needing to sell myself. I think in a sense, I believe perhaps idealistically that that truth is, I guess, the highest value of all. That at the very least, I value the truth above all. May not be a thing that everybody else values to the same extent. So I think I come in with an idealistic mindset of being like, the truth is the truth. Like, why do I need to sell the truth to you, right? Like, I know I'm capable of certain things. Why do I need to kind of put it across in a way that is like I'm trying to sell my skill set to you as an employer? So, I mean, I'm not saying this is the best way to go about things. I don't think it is. And I'm aware that there's a bit of stubbornness in this way of being as well, but I'm not going to judge myself for it because this is where I am now. But like I said, like, that judgment is part of the coping mechanism of learning to live in a society, right? So it is hard to really be as I am because there are so many things, a lot of it already internalized, to be like, you can't live that way, you can't behave that way in this society, you can't be like that. And as much as being myself is the easiest thing to do, to come home to how I really want to behave, it is also the hardest thing because there's so much messaging around how, like, both outside that I've internalized and also just like internally in my head. There's like messaging from like people that you're actively talking to, interacting with, and also like all messaging that has been internalized inside, right? All telling you that like the way you are is not the way to be. Like, you shouldn't be doing whatever it is that you're doing right now. That is not following the script and is making things more difficult for other people. But like, I don't know. This is one of those videos that's kind of like just a timestamp in where I am right now. I don't have an answer, but what I do know is that I have decided to commit to myself, in that I am committed to making choices that are most aligned to who I am in the moment. And yes, there will be consequences, of course, there would be, but I think coming to realize that I can deal with the consequences is going to be part of that learning process. So that's today's video about how being myself is both the easiest and hardest thing, and my thoughts on it at the moment. So I'm gonna end this video here. See you in the next one. Bye.